Welcome back to part 2 of our Out and About Knapsack tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to sew the very front compartment of our knapsack. We're going to need each one of the supplies on my table here. First, we're going to need the front compartment zipper loop. We're going to need pocket A, pocket C, which is a slip pocket, pocket B, which is a zipper pocket with mesh, and both the quilted front and back panels of the front compartment. Just as an overview, pocket A is going to be placed on the very front of our front panel. When we turn that over, we're going to place pocket B, which is the mesh with zipper, on the back of that, and that will become the very front of our front compartment. The back portion of the front compartment, I know this gets a little tricky, we're going to turn that to the lining side and we're going to attach pocket C, which is our slip pocket. Once this last pocket is attached, we're going to create this beautiful shape around the 4 edges of this compartment, and then we're going to attach the zipper loop. Grab your ruler and fabric pencil. We're going to draw a placement mark 6.5 inches up from the bottom of the front panel. This is going to help us identify where to place pocket A on the front panel itself. Line up pocket A's bound edge, the top edge of the pocket, with your 6.5 inch marking. Grab some clips as well, because we're going to clip this all the way around the pocket area. And remember, as you just saw me there, remember to move the zipper tab into the center of the pocket, because we're going to sew all the way around all 4 edges. Sew 1/8 of an inch around the entire perimeter of the pocket. And what I do when I'm stitching on the binding here is I follow the exact stitches that were there when we first created pocket A to make sure that I don't create a second line of stitching. So make it easy, clip everything, remove your clips as you go, and sew 1/8 of an inch away from all 4 edges. I do back stitch when I start stitching and end, just to make sure that my threads stay in place. Feel free to cut off the excess zipper tape on both sides and turn this over, because we're going to attach pocket B to the lining side of our front compartment. Find pocket B and center it so that the mesh is extending past all 4 sides of our pocket compartment. Measure 2 inches down from the edge of our quilted fabric and pin this whole mesh pocket in place. Try not to stretch the mesh, because there is a tendency to kind of pull it one direction or another, but just lay it flat. And I use pins to do this because the mesh does extend past the 4 edges. The other thing that I do is I like to pin the zipper tape in place, because once we've moved the zipper tab over, the zipper tape will move and separate on its own, but I like to put a pin in place of either the top side or the bottom of the zipper tape, just to make sure it doesn't move. And so when the zipper is pulled closed, that everything is still in alignment. So when we're at our sewing machine, again, we're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the quilted fabric all the way around. Again, go slow over your zipper tape. Move your pins as you go and backstitch. This is a great zipper pocket. And once we're back over here at our cutting table, we want to remove all the excess mesh and zipper tape. Make sure everything is flush with the edge of our quilted fabric. After we finish cleaning up the edges of our front compartment, find your ruler, fabric pencil, 6.5-inch circle, which is on the back sheet of the Bayani pattern, and a 2.5-inch circle. And as you know, I always use the bottom of a thread cone for that 2.5-inch marking. But first, what we want to do is we want to use our fabric pencil and mark the center of at the top and the bottom of the front compartment. And then measure in 1 inch from each of the top corners and place a mark. What we're going to do here is draw a line from that 1 inch mark at the top to the very bottom corner. Draw one line, and this is going to start the angle of the front compartment. Because if you remember the look of this bag, it has rounded tops and rounded bottom corners. We're going to do the same thing on the right side. Draw a line from the 1 inch in mark from the top to the corner point at the bottom of this compartment. Now we need our 6.5-inch circle. And I will say, for some reason, my 6.5-inch circle did not print 6.5 inches, so I created my own. I don't know what I did with it, because I did copy the back page of the pattern and I copied it same size, but I just tried to make sure that the 6.5 inches was truly 6.5. So now what we need to do is take that circle, position it between the top edge of our quilted fabric and that diagonal line that we just drew. And you'll notice that that 6.5-inch circle is not centered. But what we want to do is we want to mark that curve on the right side and then move the circle to the left. Again, the circle needs to touch the top of our quilted fabric and the diagonal line on the left side and trace our curve. We're just doing the curves on the top. And we're going to do the same thing for the bottom two corners, but we're going to use our 2.5-inch circle or the bottom of a thread cone. I just like using the thread cone because it's easy to handle. So we'll do the same thing right along the edge of the left and the bottom of our panel. Draw the curved line. Now what we're going to do is I actually go over to my sewing machine and stitch 1/8 of an inch inside that curved line at the top and the bottom two edges. I do the stitching before I cut away the excess fabric. You can do this either way, but I've gone to the sewing machine and just jumped back here so that you can see that it has been stitched. With your scissor, cut all the way around, following your stitch line. You end up being about 1/8 of an inch away from your stitch line. And this will form the very front panel to the front compartment. And make sure that the top and bottom markings are still visible for the center of the bag, because we'll need those when we line up our zipper loop to sew this panel to the zipper loop itself. So we're going to set this aside because now that is done, and we'll start working on the back portion of the front compartment. Just like the front portion, we want to mark the center of the top and bottom of this back portion of the bag, flip it over because this is the side, the lining side is where we'll put this slip pocket. Measure down 4 inches from the top edge of our panel. Measure down 2 inches and draw a line all the way across, 4 inches all the way across. And then the center markings should both be 4 1/4 inches from the left and the right side. With our slip pocket, what we want to do is line up the top edge of the fold over elastic with the 4-inch mark, the 4 inches down from the top. Use pins or clips to keep this in place. And remember, this slip pocket has 2 compartments on the left side that will be flat compartments, and then the right side of this is gathered. So what we want to do is make sure that we have gathered the bottom edge of our slip pocket so that we don't have any crinkles or bulk or anything down below. We want to have a nice even gathering all the way across the bottom when we sew this pocket to the panel itself. So pull the string, pull your thread to make sure that the gathering is even all the way across. And then we'll just clip this in place. Once this is clipped in place, we want to go over to the sewing machine and sew down the right side, across the bottom. Don't forget each one of the little compartments, and then stitch up the left side, 1/8 of an inch away from the edges. Now we need to make the exact same shape on the back panel that we did on the front panel. So mark your center of this specific panel, and then 1 inch in from the left top corner and the right top corner. Draw your diagonal line from that 1 inch marking down to each lower point. And then we need our 6.5 inch circle and our 2.5 inch circle, our templates. Mark the center top and the right and draw your curve. Also on the left side, draw the curve between the edges. Annie's brilliant for coming up with these exact curves to make this bag so precisely accurate. It's phenomenal. And again, the bottom 2 corners, we want to use our 2.5 inch template. And then jump over to your sewing machine, stitch inside 1/8 of an inch away from your drawn line, and then we're going to come back over here and we're going to cut away the excess fabric. We're really getting to a point right now where we get to sew the back and the front panel to our zipper loop, which is really kind of the fun part of this whole process, is to see everything come together in such a great way. Now we'll need some pins and clips. Mark the center of the top and the bottom of both panels using pins. Now you're going to see here that I folded this in half and marked the center of each side. Well, in reality, the center of each side is not the center from top to bottom because of all the curves. So you don't need to do that. Just make sure that you have the pins in both the top and bottom where we marked with our marking pencil in a prior step. But again, you don't need the side pins because that is definitely not the true center of the side panel. We also need to pin the centers of the zipper loop. Match the edges of the base, folding that in half. That is the center of the bottom of the front compartment. So put pins in both sides to make sure that we have both sides marked. Stretch that across. Now you have the center of the top of the front panel. So mark that on both sides with your pin. You don't need the centers. So you can ignore this little part here where I'm trying to make sure that everything is centered on the zipper panel, and we just don't need that because of all the curves that are in the bag itself, the rounded edges. I pinned this on, I clipped this on, and realized that it wasn't evenly spaced. And so I took that off again and did this the right way. But I just didn't fix the video to show that. I just wanted you to know that that did not matter. I use clips to clip the entire edge of the zipper loop to the right side of the back portion, the back panel of this front compartment. Work the fabric starting at the top pin and the bottom pin, and then work around each side. Do this slowly. Again, you're going to see me trying to match these pins. It is really not going to work that way. They do need to move both right and left in order for it to match. And you can see here, now that I'm at the sewing machine, exactly what I mean. I've positioned the wrong side of the panel, the lining side of the panel, against my sewing table. This really makes it, I think it's a lot easier to stitch on the zipper loop first and stitch a 1/4 inch away from the edge, removing your clips as you go. And this is when I really find it handy again to use the Buy Any stiletto or any stiletto of your choice, but it really keeps the fabric flat underneath your presser foot, keeps your fingers away from the needle, because you're going to always want to really keep your fingers close and keep the fabric flat, and we just want to keep our fingers away from any sewing needle at all. So move the clips as you go. I'm going to go slower around the curve so you can kind of see reality. It does take a little bit of time. So I go slow, try to keep everything flat. And on my sewing machine, I have a little thread loop that extends out the left side. So you're going to see me always trying to keep the fabric below that little thread loop. And so it does make it a little bit more difficult to work with bulky fabric under this specific sewing machine, but this is how slow I go. I just wanted you to see reality, because on a portion of this, I am going to go super fast. I'm going to speed this up because I don't want it to be super monotonous for you. But I do also want you to know that you do not need to go fast when you're sewing a zipper loop or binding or any kind of intricate work to any of the quilted fabric. So go slow. We're almost at the edge, and the curves, I actually find them kind of fun to go around. So we just have a little bit more to go, and I do start and stop with a back stitch, so you'll see that that is all done. Everything is flat, and next we're going to grab our binding. I like to attach the binding to the zipper loop side of the bag and then pull the binding around to the flat side of this front compartment. And In reality, you don't need to clip the binding all the way around the bag. Most of the time, what I'll do is I'll take the binding, I'll start it at the very base of the bag like I just did here, and then I'll just kind of use clips to take it around the first corner. Take the entire bag plus the binding over to my sewing machine and ease the binding around as I'm sewing. With the binding in hand and my scissor, let's go over to the sewing machine and attach our binding. We're going to start right at the bottom base of the bag. I leave a little bit of a binding tail. And now the one thing to understand about binding is you can finish the join of the binding any way you'd like. I do a very simple approach, which you'll see once we get all the way around the bag. But right now I'm starting kind of in the center base of the bag, and we'll begin sewing. Again, a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the bag. Start slow, and I started sewing in the middle of the base of the bag using my stiletto. I'm going to remove the clips as I go, and then keep your binding as taut and flat along the curve as you can. And again, there's no race, so just take your time and make sure that everything is flush with the edge of the bag. Continue sewing all the way around the perimeter of the bag, 1/4 inch seam, and moving the binding as you go. And this is sort of where you really don't need to clip the binding to the entire perimeter of the bag, because everything sort of moves and fills in as you go. So I'm going around the last curve, and then we're going to join the ends of the binding. Now, on a lot of the By Annie videos, she shows you how to create a traditional binding that a quilter would use when you are joining two ends with a diagonal seam, measuring everything out. And I just simply, this time, decided I was going to create a simple folded binding where I seated one end of the binding in the other, because the inside of the front compartment is literally unnoticeable. So I just decided that I was going to do a very simple binding and finish this with ease. Once the binding is in place, we're going to turn the binding and fold it to the flat side of our bag. Use clips to keep this in place, working the curved edges to be very flat. We'll just need to work that around, and then we're going to top stitch again right along the inside folded edge of the binding. And what I typically do is I will align the outside folded edge of the binding with the right side of my presser foot. And the width of my presser foot really allows for a very, very nice finish when I follow that guideline. And it allows me to top stitch on this side of the binding, and the stitching ends up in the binding on the other side as well. And you'll see as you go around the curves here is just keep the underside, the zipper loop, folded underneath, and this will finish off beautifully. Take your clips out as you go. Use your stiletto to keep everything even with the edge of the bag, and you'll end up with a beautifully finished binding. If you're not comfortable with the binding, you can definitely take the time to hand bind this in place. But remember, this is the inside of the front compartment of your bag. And it's really, for me, It's a great way to hone in my binding skills when I'm working on a bag like this. Go all the way around, go as slow as you can. I know my video is on high speed. The more you bind, the better our skills become. I think this looks pretty good. Now it's time to go back over to our table and we're going to work on the front side of our front compartment. With right sides together, and make sure you unzip the zipper loop. It will make it so much easier to sew now that we've got the back portion of the front compartment attached. Keep that zipper open. Use clips all the way around the outside of our bag, securing right sides together, the zipper loop to the front side of our front compartment. I'm sewing with the zipper tape up against the base of the presser foot. And so starting at the center base of our zipper loop, I backstitch and then continue to sew pretty slowly. Now what you're going to see with this particular bag is a lot of bulk on either side of the base of the zipper tape because that has our multiple layers of soft and stable plus the binding. So this can get quite bulky. But as you go around the curves, again, go very slow. Use your stiletto and you're going to have to pull with your left hand. I shouldn't say pull, it's more keep the bag, all of the bulk of that bag away from your needle. So once you're past the base of the bag, you can open up your bag, flip it to the back, and if you're working with enough room on your sewing machine area, this portion is actually relatively easy because you're simply stitching the zipper to the front portion of our front compartment. This is one of the great features of the Out and About Knapsack is that the zipper tape opens all the way down to the base of the bag. Not every one of the Bayani bag designs are this way. And so even though you're working with the bulk at the base of the bag, you can pretty easily manipulate all of the sewing and the construction under the needle with ease. Okay, here now we have to flip that bag back closed because we're stitching around the base of the front compartment. Go really slow. I keep my left hand so close to the presser foot because, as I had mentioned earlier, I have this little thread loop that's a piece of metal that comes out on the left side of my needle area that has to stay pretty flush. And so I have to keep my fabric just that much further away from the presser foot and the needle. So that's why you're going to see my left hand really close to the presser foot. You may not have that issue if you're working with a different machine. We all have different machines, so you'll just have to work with what you have on your particular machine. So you come down to the end, back stitch, and we're done. I'm always super anxious to make sure everything works. So I just turned this thing right side out and made sure that the zipper closed nicely. It all closes great. So now what we have to do is we have to add our binding to the unbound edge of the bag. Binding this final edge is just like applying the binding to the back portion of this front compartment. It's exactly the same. Now what I'm doing here is I'm actually closing the zipper a little bit because it just makes it easier to attach the binding around the curves when the bag isn't flopping open. So I'm just going to close the zipper, use clips to put the binding in place all the way around the bag. And then we'll go over to the sewing machine, and again, the same exact manner, we're going to stitch the binding to the bag. Now, I do have the mesh side flat against my table, and I start sewing, again, 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the bag. I'm sewing really close to the first curve at the base of the bag. Go slow. Keep your fabric away from your presser foot using your left hand. And adjust your binding as you go around. And as you can see here, I only clipped a portion of the binding to the bag. So now what I'm doing is just going to move it around as I go. And you can take the time to take the pins out of your binding before you come over to the sewing machine. That would make it easier as well, because by now, the fold, even though it's not a creased fold in your binding, it will stay together nicely. So here's our last curve at the base of the bag. And this is where there's that little bit of extra bulk. So go slow over these seams and use your favorite method to join your binding. I am simply doing a fold over binding. I am not doing a traditional quilted binding where we're joining at the diagonal. I'm just simply folding them over, and then when I fold the binding over to the other side of the bag, we don't even see the extra line. So here I'm pulling it around to the other side. Use your clips. Keep everything really flat. See how nicely flat that is around the curves. I will tell you, if for some reason you took too deep of a 1/4 inch around your lower corners, use your scissor and trim them. Just trim it down, because you want to make sure that the binding really covers the edge of our bag. Just work with that over time, and your 1/4 inch will be a true 1/4 inch. So now we've already folded this around to the other side, and we're top stitching. And again, for me, what I do is I run my outer edge of the binding right on the edge of my presser foot. And I feel like I get a very nice, even top stitch on both sides of the binding by doing it that way. Now, do you see what's happening here? There is my little metal hook. I have to be very careful with this mesh and keep that away from that little metal hook on my sewing machine. Now, you may not have that issue, but I do. So I have to be really careful when it comes to mesh when I'm sewing binding, or basically any kind of bulk right against my presser foot like that. So go slow, move everything away, your clips, the other side of this front compartment. Everything will turn out really, really nice. And again, if you would prefer to hand bind and finish your bag that way, you can do that. But I really like the fact that these are inside compartments that give you a chance to really work with and play with and hone in your skills on binding on the Bianni bags here. But you see, again, here is where that little hook, I have to be very careful with the edge of my presser foot there to make sure I don't hook any of the mesh. And there we have it. Let's turn this right side out. Push all of the edges into their intended position, and we have our front compartment. Look at that. It's like its own little finished bag. If it had handles, you'd be done. So now we have completed the front compartment for our Out and About knapsack. We have a front zipper. Inside our front compartment, we have a mesh area with a zipper closure. We have a really nice base area. We have our slip pockets that you can put anything you'd like into. And as you can see, the binding sits inside, zipper closure. You can add some fun zipper tabs if you'd like, some decorations and charms. But look, I mean, it's like its own little tiny bag. And on the next video, which is our final video, you're going to see why we did our fabric pencil markings on the back side of our front compartment, and we'll use it when we join our front compartment to the main portion of the Out and About knapsack. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and we will see you on the final video for Out and About knapsack.